Welcome back, Craig. It is so good to have you with us again. Last month's conversation landed beautifully with our parents, and June feels like the natural next step. This month, we're focusing on emotional regulation and specifically on the soundscape of the home. So, for any parents joining us for the first time, Craig is a leading ASMR researcher, the author of Brain Tingles, the founder of ASMR University, and his work has really shaped how we understand the way sound communicates safety to the nervous system. And frankly, it's a huge part of why HushAway sounds the way it does. The question we're sitting with today is one I've heard from so many parents. Is my home hush enough? Not, is it quiet enough? Because honestly, whose home is? But is it kind enough? Is it gentle enough? And is it predictable enough for a child whose nervous system is already working harder than most? So, Craig, before we get stuck into all of the angles that we're going to explore today, what struck you most when you saw this theme come through?
It's really good because I think even myself, I would think that you're visualizing maybe a neurodivergent child out in the public and there's a lot of noise out there. Like, once we get you home, you'll be in the safest space possible. And there's a lot of truth to that. But our understanding as a society, as scientists, of what is an optimal soundscape for a child, for a neurodivergent child especially, is evolving. And so we do need to understand, we do need to revisit, how can a home be made more optimal? How can the soundscape be improved in a way? And it's not just, as you said, it's not just about silence. It's about an intentional soundscape for the child. And how do we create that? How do we modify that?
Great, thank you. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We've got a number of angles, I think is the best way to describe it, that we'd like to explore with you today. And the first angle is why the home soundscape matters more than parents realize. And I suppose before a child can really regulate, their nervous system is already listening to the room. So my question, Craig, is most parents think of the home as a place where the child should feel calm by default, but our nervous systems are listening constantly. So what does the research that you're familiar with tell us about how the everyday soundscape of a home actually affects a child's ability to emotionally regulate?
It is a challenge because when you're talking about sounds, everyone's brains detect sounds. It's not like taste. You shut your mouth and you don't taste anything. Our ears are always open, but that doesn't mean we're processing sounds in the same way. So there is a spectrum of sensory adaptation, which at the brain level is kind of driven by areas of the brain known as the thalamus and cerebellum. Is that when a sound goes in my brain, it might get processed in a different way than someone else's brain. Now, for most people, they're good at tuning out what might be constant sounds. When a lot of people walk into a room and there's an air conditioner, there's some kind of constant sound in there. Our brains are quick to tune those out because through evolution, our brains have learned that, well, a sound like that, it's constant, it's not threatening, so we can ignore it. But that is not true for everyone's brains, especially neurodivergent brains. Some individuals, for whatever reason, their brains are not as good as others at tuning out sounds. As a result, when they walk into that same room, they have increased awareness of the sounds around them. And it's not just awareness, but those sounds may be processed as threatening, even as something as simple as the bubble noise coming out of an aquarium nearby. And if the sound is processed as threatening, then that individual is going to feel stress. They're going to have an increase in their cortisol levels. They're going to feel mental pain. So the challenge here is to understand, how can homes be improved? And so visualize that everyone's home, to some degree, is a symphony of chaotic noise. And symphony even is a misuse here, because you think of symphony as the coordination of positive sounds for enjoyment. But this is not that. It's really chaotic noise. So these are the sounds of maybe a TV in the background, clocks, fridge. And I speak from experience on that one. My wife and I get annoyed by our own fridge. There's heaters making sounds. There's voices in the same room, in other rooms. There's voices outside. There's traffic. And so there really is this symphony of chaotic noise. And I wouldn't say I have a strong neurodivergent brain that walks into a room and is overwhelmed by these in the way others are. But I did have an experience that kind of opened up my eyes to this. Is several years ago, I was going outside and I was trying to record nature sounds. So when you walk around, you hear these birds singing, you hear, like, if you're near like a little river, babbling brooks, and at nighttime you hear crickets. And you think, great, all I got to do is turn on an audio recorder and I'll get these pure nature sounds. What I discovered was the moment I turned on my recorder and I listened through headphones, I suddenly heard all these other sounds that I didn't notice before. Jets going overhead, traffic in the distance. And it really was frustrating. And to me, that was just a small window of what others may experience in their homes and out of their homes. The good news here is that ASMR audio can be helpful for relaxing someone that is challenged by sounds, because ASMR audio is not chaotic. It is purposely gentle, it's methodical and therefore predictable, and it's created to help people and relax them. I was part of a team that did a survey several years ago, and we've been collecting lots of data. And one of the key things that we saw in our data set is that the number one benefit of ASMR content was that it makes people, or it helps people, feel relaxed, and it reduces their stress. And then other studies have also looked at the effects of ASMR on individuals. And sure enough, physiological benefits are also confirmed, meaning reduction of heart rate and reduction of blood pressure. So the important thing as people think about their own homes is, if the soundscape in your home is not intentionally controlled, then chances are it's chaotic. And you may not be aware of it. So you want to kind of make the soundscape in your home intentional. And I think a good way to think of this is, right now, visualize your home, visualize your living room, look around. Your visual landscape in your home is very intentional. You've selected certain paintings or pictures to be hung on the wall. You have photographs in a certain arrangement on tables. Your visual landscape is intentional. Is your soundscape intentional? And so that's something that takes a little more effort and awareness.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. You mentioned ASMR. And so let's just look at actually what it does do to a child's nervous system, because it isn't a trend. And we've had this conversation several times, haven't we, over the course of this year. It is a nervous system response, and it's exactly what overwhelmed children need. So, Craig, sometimes parents can hear the word ASMR and think of whispery YouTube videos for adults. And obviously, HushAway is positioned very differently. So can you explain in parent-friendly language what ASMR actually is physiologically, and why those same principles are so powerful for children, especially neurodivergent ones?
Yeah, understanding ASMR can be a challenge. There's a lot of misinformation out there. In simple terms, ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It is a physiological response, and the key aspects of that physiological response involve a feeling of deep relaxation with these pleasant brain tingles. And what triggers this response are gentle sounds, soft voices, and especially in the context of positive personal attention. And we investigated this by doing some brain scans. So we had some individuals lie in they're called fMRI machines, but they're basically just large machines that scan someone's brain, looks at what regions become active in a specific situation. And so the situation that we looked at is when they're watching ASMR videos, what is happening inside their brains? And what we saw was that there are very specific regions that are activated. And then when we looked in further to try to understand why those regions, one of the surprising things that came out, well, I don't know if surprising is the best word, because I did kind of anticipate that certain regions would be activated. I guess when I say surprised, I was surprised it was so clear. And those regions were rich in oxytocin receptors. And if you've heard about oxytocin, which many people have, they've often heard it referred to as the love hormone or the comfort hormone. It's the hormone that is well known to be released between a caregiver and an infant or a child during those positive personal interactions. And it's also released between best friends, mates. They've even showed owners and dogs release oxytocin when they get close together and they have a positive interaction. It's just a hormone that kind of gives you that feeling of, this is a loved one and I feel comfort from that moment. So the curiosity then becomes, with ASMR, why is it that soft, predictable sounds are stimulating this relaxing feeling? And what I believe the answer is that a soft voice, a gentle sound, these are cues for safety. These are cues that wherever that sound is coming from, whether it's a person or it's being created in some other way, if they're soft, they're gentle, they're predictable, they're low volume, then chances are whatever is making those sounds is not a threat. And another way to easily think of this is kind of think of the opposite. What kind of sounds are going to make you feel afraid or scared? Well, loud, unpredictable, frenetic sounds, because they stimulate an alert response. Those are cues for danger. So it actually makes sense that the opposite of sounds that make us feel scared and threatened are going to make us feel safe. So what about ASMR audio for neurodivergent children? Well, their nervous systems are often on high alert. That's part of the challenge. So ASMR stimuli, ASMR audio, ASMR content can provide a strong and specific signal that subconsciously tells the brain you're safe, switching them from this state of high alert to this state of feeling relaxed and comforted. And I think, lastly, something I really should mention is that when we think of ASMR videos on YouTube, that necessarily isn't what you should think of when you think of ASMR content for children. A lot of ASMR videos on YouTube are tailored, created to soothe and entertain adults. I mean, the whole reason certain people make certain types of videos on YouTube is the feedback they get from the people who watch those videos, which tend to be neurotypical adults who want to see those creators try something new, do something different. ASMR content for children shouldn't be so complicated. It should stick to just the core principles. And this is what HushAway does when they create their soundscapes, is they stick to the core sound elements of the effective ASMR content. And they also do get feedback from children. So instead of relying on this adult feedback loop, is they use a child feedback loop to make the most optimal soundscapes. So the core stimuli in ASMR audio for children is just soft vocal tones. It's predictable sounds and it's gentle pacing.
And yes, we do. We've got lots and lots and lots of testimonials from our children about all the sounds and the stories and the affirmations. So in the UK, and I would imagine it's probably the same in the USA, but we've got around about 40% of our children in the UK struggle with sleep, and bedtime seems to be that place where parents need most help, and it can become a battleground. And the sound in the room can be part of that problem, but also can be part of the solution. So, sleep is the number one issue that neurodivergent children raise with us. The racing thoughts, the sensory kind of overload from the day, the anxiety about tomorrow. What does your research say about how sound can help a child's nervous system actually downshift at night?
Yeah, I think to understand this solution or what can be a helpful tool, it's first best probably to understand the problem. And this is something I've really thought about over the past few years, is what really drives sleep challenges. And I've boiled it down to three core or key problems. And the first one are environmental sounds, meaning the noise around someone who's trying to fall asleep. This could be footsteps in the house, the voices in the house, voices outside on the street, could be the creaks of the house. It could be the wind whipping around the house. For my neighborhood, it tends to be dogs barking at night is the environmental challenge for me falling asleep. The second key problem, and this is very distinct for neurodiverse brains, is an overactive mind, which you mentioned. And so now think of that as internal noise. There's the environmental sounds, those are the external noise challenge. But an overactive mind is an internal noise challenge. So even having a quiet environment doesn't mean it's easy to fall asleep. And what these overactive minds do is they get into these processes and states of high imagination or innovation. So the problem with the imagination is it can lead to the third challenge for sleep, which is emotional dysregulation. Neurodivergent brains, their overactive brains will start hearing maybe some of these external sounds, and they translate those into threats. And now fear is their alert signal that they have. They're overreacting to those sounds. When I said the other type of overactive mind is innovation, that may not have initially made sense. And it's part of my own understanding because my brain does this at night, which is it starts getting into this overactive state and I start thinking of ideas. I start just thinking about so many things and it kind of puts my brain into a mania state, which makes it hard to fall asleep. So these are the three challenges with falling asleep: the external sounds, the internal noise, and then what we do with that internal noise and those external sounds. This is how ASMR sounds and HushAway soundscapes can help with these three problems. The first thing they're going to do is they help to mask the external sounds. You're not going to be able to stop all external sounds in a house or around a house. So instead, by listening to audio, you are applying the simple principle of masking the external sounds that are distracting. If you know someone who uses white noise, that is the main purpose for white noise. It is simply to mask external sounds because white noise is constructed from all the sound frequencies that we perceive. So it doesn't matter what type of sound it is, it will be slightly masked by white noise. Or if you know people who like to listen to or turn on a fan while they fall asleep. But the problem with white noise and fans is even though they can mask external sounds, they do not distract from the internal noise of an overactive brain. This is what ASMR sounds and HushAway soundscapes, whether these are stories being told or other kind of engaging content inside the audio, is they're now shifting the internal dialogue from, is that sound a monster? Or thinking about all these ideas. Now I'm part of a story. I'm listening to something. My brain is distracted. And if you know people who, well, before I fall asleep each night, I like to read a book. I like to watch a video. I like to listen to audiobooks. That's exactly what they're doing. They're distracting their internal noise. But once again, there's a shortcoming with books, videos, and general audiobooks, is they don't emotionally regulate in the way that ASMR audio and HushAway soundscapes can do. We've seen by our own research that people use ASMR audio and ASMR content because it helps to calm them. And it's probably due to this activation and release of oxytocin, because the brain is interpreting these sounds and these soundscapes as there's someone kind and caring nearby. So this is a good time for me to just relax and fall asleep. We saw in our survey data, and just to throw some numbers at you, is we've collected data from over 20,000 individuals who experience ASMR. And so we asked them, does ASMR, experiencing ASMR, utilizing ASMR content, does that help you to fall asleep? And 75% of these 20,000 individuals said yes. We also asked the same question to people who were diagnosed with ADHD. And we didn't have 20,000 individuals in that group. We had about 1,700. And I really expected the number to go down, that percent to go down. I figured breaking through an ADHD brain and calming it with ASMR content was going to be more challenging. This was a big surprise in our data. It was exactly the same. 75% of all the individuals in our survey who were diagnosed with ADHD reported the ASMR content that helped them fall asleep. And we looked at autistic individuals also, or individuals on the autism spectrum. We had a little over 300 individuals in that group. And we asked them the same question. And once again, we got the surprise finding the percent didn't change a bit. It seems that ASMR content is helpful for helping any type of brain relax. And then lastly, I'll just share some anecdotal data. So this is not, deep analysis of data, but it's just that I've launched a couple of audio-only podcasts. And I've launched them with my strong belief in this value of masking, distracting, and calming for the benefits of audio. And I either whisper gently or I speak very softly. And the listeners of those podcast audio episodes repeatedly tell me that my voice and stories help them fall asleep. But the most surprising thing is that so many of them tell me that they re-listen to the same episodes over and over again. And this shocked me because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do not re-listen to episodes. Listeners who struggle to fall asleep and they're turning to an audio source, they really do want that audio source to be intentionally created. They want the repetition. They want the predictability. They want it to be something that they know will work because they've used it many, many times again. And I think this is also one of the key principles of intentional HushAway content. It's not just pulled off the internet, but it's created with these key principles in mind of soft vocals, gentle sounds, and an understanding that someone is going to re-listen to that same content over and over again because it's helpful.
And thank you for your continued support of HushAway. And you're absolutely right. That's obviously a lot to do with the concept development and has been very heavily researched and evidence-backed. So listen, parents that are listening to this and probably thinking, gosh, what can I do? What can I do quickly within the home? Some kind of easy changes at a time when maybe their child is feeling dysregulated. They just don't know where to start. So what are the most practical, low effort changes that you could recommend they try?
I would say maybe first start with the thing that is always with you, which is yourself. A corny way to put this might be the calm you want to see, meaning demonstrate a relaxed mindset. Whatever is the situation in your home, try to always approach it and interact with it in a gentle demeanor, with a gentle voice, with a gentle touch. And I think that's, of course, easier said than done. And I think a good tip here is try to channel the most relaxed and caring person you know. And this may be someone in your life, or maybe you're just visualizing Mr. Rogers. How would Mr. Rogers approach this situation? How would he react? Or Bob Ross? Or another tip that I give people is to watch ASMR videos on YouTube. And you will see some individuals that have become experts at putting forth a very gentle, caring, and relaxing demeanor. And sure enough, there's research that confirms that soft and gentle parental vocals lowers stress in children by when they measure their stress hormones. So, of course, though, you're not always going to be able to be that best tool sometimes to help a situation. So it's good to have alternatives to yourself. And this is not because it's negligence. And I think this can be challenging for parents and caregivers is, well, if I hand them some audio to listen to, I'm just being negligent as a parent. I should give them my attention. It should be me that makes that change. And I have to share some more shocking data from our research. For these individuals that we surveyed, over 20,000 individuals who experience ASMR, one of the questions we asked them is that, where do you prefer your ASMR experience comes from? Do you prefer it to come from a real human in real life who's in front of you, or do you prefer it to come from an ASMR video? Now, happily in a way, the number one option was they preferred a real human in front of them. But here's the surprising data. The number two option came in at 44%, which is 44% of people preferred an ASMR video to relax them rather than a real human. So if you're in a situation at home and you're utilizing some kind of audio landscape to relax a child, that may be the child's preference rather than seeing it as negligence or even as a punishment. If you say to a child, well, let's go over, we've created this hush corner in our house. We have speakers here before you, or we have a headset here. We have selected relaxing audio for you. That's not a punishment in the corner the way some people might think of it. Again, that may be the preference of the child. So you're working with the child also to find out what works best for them and in what situations. It may be you at times, or it may be some ASMR audio at times. What you can also do in your home is take an inventory of house sounds. Like, what are the sounds in your home? Listen closely, and what you might hear are things you never noticed before. You might notice there's a lot of doors where the hinges need some oil. I often have that problem, and I just get negligent. Like, I'll oil that later, and then I forget about it. But listen for just door hinges. Listen for the sound of doors and cabinets closing. You could put little soft felt sticky things on there so they close quietly. Be aware of TV volume. Be aware of voices in the house. Be careful about when you run the dishwasher. All these sounds that you might be able to modify in your home and reduce this chaotic symphony can be extra beneficial, especially at bedtime. And a bedtime routine for a neurodivergent child is different than a bedtime routine for a neurotypical child. But when I think of a bedtime routine for an average child, it might be the caregiver reads them a story, turns off the light, and walks out. Neurodivergent children may need a longer off-ramp. It's not just one step. And when I say longer, I don't mean just read them that book for a longer period of time. I mean longer by multi-steps as well. And it also should kind of go from active aspects getting more and more passive. So here's an example. It might begin with going around the room and gathering stuffed animals that the child enjoys to sleep with. And then the next step is reading a book with the light on. And then the next step is turning the night light on. And then the next step is turning the overhead light off. And then the next step is listening to some relaxing audio. And maybe you stay there initially for the first part of it, or this is the time where they kind of focus on their own relaxation in a mostly dark room. And so I think having this multi-step process in a house where you've dampened some of the chaotic symphony overall can be very helpful.
Really useful, practical tools. And so when we ask the question, is your home hush enough? It is just a question, it's not a judgment. And so this isn't about quiet homes, it's about using sound in an intentional and kind way. So, Craig, the title of this conversation is your home hush enough? And I want to make sure that parents don't hear that as, is your home quiet enough? Because that feels impossible. What's the real question that we're asking here?
The key point that can be hard for people to understand is that silence is not the goal for two reasons. It's unrealistic. I know that as a podcast recorder, is that people will talk about, silent rooms to record. There's no such thing as silent room to record in. There's always sounds, there's always noise. And the average household is filled with other family members and pets, and you're not going to be able to consistently control them. There's also TVs, as I've mentioned, dishwashers, washing machines, neighborhood dogs I've mentioned, and even garage doors going up and down. Silence may not only be unrealistic, but it can be problematic for someone with a neurodivergent brain. A silent environment doesn't equal a silent brain. In fact, there's a statement or a quote, whatever you want to call it, that many people have heard. Silence can be maddening. I know for me it can be, because my brain likes to be overactive. And once the sounds around me go silent, my brain just starts ramping up to kind of fill that gap. So neurodivergent children can have their own internal noise because of these overactive brains. And these overactive brains can often benefit from having the chaotic symphony reduced, but then kind of replaced with appropriate sounds. And that's what we call a hush environment. It purposely incorporates intentional, soft, and gentle sounds to help lead to this state of relaxation, or at least to augment relaxation. And this may be more situational than constant. You may not be able to always have this hush environment 24 hours in your home. So what you can do to start is just think of, what are the key moments in a house where a hush environment may be really important? And these key moments may be right at morning time. It might be when a child comes home from school, or as kind of we mentioned before, bedtime. So these sounds can be utilized for each of these moments. Overall, I would say, don't expect a perfect environment. Challenges will always occur. So this is always just easier said than done. So you're not going to be able to prevent all these moments, but you can have a reactive plan ready. You can have some hush corners created in your house, as well as other types of sonic safety, could be a term, one way to think of it, that work for your specific child. And yeah, as a scientist, I will also say it will probably require some trial and error. So there are a lot of helpful strategies and tools out there. So do your best to be patient and keep trying different things until you find those specific things that work best for your child and your household.
Craig, thank you. There's so much in there for parents to take away. And what I love is that none of it requires another app or another download or another thing on a parent's to-do list. It's a softer voice. It's a predictable pocket of sound, a hush corner, as you say, small, doable and repeatable. And I think This is the bit that always makes me emotional. Parents listening to this are not failing. Their homes aren't broken. Their children aren't broken. They just haven't been handed the right lever. And what your research keeps showing us again and again is that sound is that lever, and it works before words. It works before reasoning, and it works at the level that the child actually needs it to work for their nervous system. So if you take one thing from this conversation today, let it be this, that hush isn't silence. Hush is sound that feels safe. And building that into your home, even in 3-minute pockets, is one of the most generous things you can do for your child. Craig, thank you as always. We'll put to your work, Brain Tingles and the ASMR University in our notes, along with all the resources at HushAway. So to the parents listening, if today's conversation resonated, the Sound Sanctuary is where the practical tools live. Stories, affirmations, soundscapes, all designed with exactly the principles that Craig has talked about today. So until next time, find peace in the little sounds. Thank you.